I want to welcome you to this episode of the Rogues Radio Podcast Live. My name is Dave Beatty. I'm one of your hosts. For the last almost 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things some people have heard of, things like Justice League of America, Batman Incorporated, Brightest Day, X-Men. But enough about that. I want to welcome back, of course, my co-host, Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks either listening or watching from home some of the amazing creative projects that you've worked on.
Well, my name is Eric Alexander, and I'm happy to be here on Rogues Radio Live. And I am the associate producer of a feature film called Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo. That film is currently available on Tubi. I'm also the chief financial officer of Bad Bob Productions.
Very cool. So to start the show off, one of the things we want to talk about is we're getting ready to actually do some format changes. We're going to be mixing things up. We're even possibly discussing the idea of maybe even changing the name of the show. We still haven't quite made a decision about that. I think we both kind of like the name, but we'll see where we go from there. So one of the things that we are definitely going to be doing for right now is we are going to be suspending the audio version of the show. There's just been a slew of different technical problems, mostly on my end, that have basically made it almost impossible to get the show out for the last several weeks, which is why there hasn't been a new episode. So for the time being, we're going to be suspending the audio show, and we're going to focus on the live show. We think this format's got a lot of potential, and it's been a lot of fun so far. So please, Eric, tell the folks at home what kind of, because you're going to be primarily hosting the Rogues Radio Podcast Live on your YouTube channel, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I guess we probably should mention that as far as the older broadcasts and such, they're no longer available because those were on your channel, and those are no longer available. But going forward, everything will be available on my YouTube, which is at Base God 14. And then also we are doing a multicast. That's one of the ways that we're trying to insulate ourselves from some of the COPPA stuff and things that are going on. We are doing a multicast. So currently we are on my YouTube, Base God 14. We're on my Twitter, Base God 14. And we're on the retrospective Facebook page on Facebook. So all three of those platforms are being utilized right now for our live broadcast.
Very cool. And just so everyone knows, the audio shows are still available. So if you want to go back and listen to, the Sketchy Business one or the Star Trek Las Vegas Convention one or any of those things, all those audio shows are still available, whether you're on Spotify or iTunes or Stitcher or whatever your service is. It's just, for the time being, we're just suspending the audio show until we get basically a savvier way to produce it. And we felt like it was, at least I personally definitely felt like it's better to focus on producing one good show and getting this down, and then segueing back into doing the audio show, just because of the technical problems that have been going on, again, primarily on my end. Now, the older versions of the live shows that were the video shows, those are no longer available, but we will discuss why as we actually get into our Streaming Wars segment, because I have a lot to say about that tonight. Unfortunately, or enough. So I think that's going to do it, unless you have anything else, Eric, for the announcement portion of the show.
No, I think that covered it.
All right, very cool. So we're going to go from that. We're going to segue into our TV and news roundup segment, although we cover a lot of pop culture and entertainment news. Maybe we should call it something more than just the TV and movie news roundup section. Pop culture news. What do you think?
That's not a bad idea.
All right, yeah, we'll just call it pop culture news. So we both have some different things to talk about this week in pop culture news. So Eric, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty good one, and I want to get your reaction on this. I think it's getting a fair amount of attention. So let me put it up real quick. Get my share screen going. These are the little problems sometimes with the being a live show. But anyway, so here we go. Noah Hawley, Hawle, to write and direct the next Star Trek movie. Have you heard about this, Dave?
Yes, I did see quite a bit about this when they announced it.
So this coverage comes from Variety. This is an article dated November 19th, 2019, so very current, just from yesterday. And it talks about that Fargo and Legion creator Noah Hawley, is that how you pronounce it? Has been tapped to write and direct the next installment of the Star Trek franchise, sources tell Variety. And it looks like we are going back to the Kelvin timeline. This will be a continuation from Star Trek Beyond. Interestingly enough, in this article, it does say this will serve as the fourth movie in the cinematic series and is separate from another Star Trek pick that Paramount is developing with Quentin Tarantino, producing with Mark L. Smith writing. So as of right now, the news is saying they're doing both, or they're at least going forward with development of both. Neither of these things are a done deal, obviously. Neither project is a done deal. But apparently it looks like, as far as Star Trek 4 is concerned, as far as the continuation of the Kelvin timeline and that cast, this is what they're looking at right now.
Yeah, and I had, like I said, I'd heard and I'd read up on this a little bit. I mean, he seems like a talented creator, so hopefully they'll come up with something interesting. You know, I like Star Trek Beyond. There was some bits of it I found a little bit confusing, but for the most part, I enjoyed Star Trek Beyond. I liked the very first film that J.J. Abrams did. I did enjoy the first one. I was not a big fan of Into Darkness. I found it weird when they announced, because when I first saw this announcement, my initial thought was, well, this must be the guy that they've tapped to do the Quentin Tarantino project, because previously what they had been developing for the next Star Trek film, which was going to have Chris Hemsworth in it, like somehow they're going to have Kirk meet his dad. I don't know exactly how it was going to work. I was never a big fan of that particular idea.
I think they were doing that because of Thor and Marvel, and they wanted to tap into that, right?
Yeah, and I get that, and I like Chris Hemsworth as an actor, and I've watched a lot of stuff that he's been in, but I personally was just not a big fan of that idea for a story. You know, it feels like, in a weird way, we're going backwards into the movies themselves. You know, like Into Darkness, of course, tried to revisit Space Seed and Wrath of Khan in one movie, so we were looking backwards. If you look at what is it? I just blanked on it. The last one they did.
Star Trek Beyond?
Yeah, Star Trek Beyond. When you look at the story in a weird way, it also has like sort of like we're going back, you know, kind of like Enterprise era stuff that, you know, they were kind of alluding to or whatever. So that's looking back. And then, of course, the first one, of course, is going back and reinterpreting, you know, 60s original series Star Trek for like a new audience. And I didn't like the idea of like, okay, well, we're going to go back and we're going to revisit the first movie. It's like, can we move forward a little bit more before we start going back? We keep going backwards. So when I originally saw this announcement, my initial thought was, well, this must be the guy who's going to do the Tarantino project, because that's what they have been actively developing that isn't currently like basically shelved, because basically everyone walked off the project. Because the last one, the Chris Hemsworth film, my understanding is pretty much everybody walked. The director left, Chris Pine left over money, and then I think Chris Hemsworth left it too, so that, you know, it's basically that wasn't moving forward. So
they had financing problems.
Yeah.
They had financing problems with Star Trek 4.
So I'm not sure what they're planning to do with this. So when I saw this wasn't the Tarantino film, I was a little like, okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's this part that I'm trying to highlight here. I'm having some difficulty with. But they say this is separate from the Quentin Tarantino project. Apparently, both are in development, which also means both might not ever happen. You know what I mean? So I think some people that are kind of like, hey, Star Trek 4 is greenlit, it's going. Well, maybe not, you know, especially when they're working on another film at the same time. So we'll have to see. I just want to say, as far as my opinion of the Kelvin, I didn't have a big problem with it when it started. In fact, I own the first Kelvin movie, Star Trek. I own it. I enjoyed it when it came out. I saw it in the theater. I thought it was about as respectful a reboot as you could do because I understand science fiction, and as long as it's like an alternate universe, alternate timeline, I get it, and I'm cool with that. But we've been going backwards for a very long time. I try to make this because let's face it, ever since we could actually go all the way back to Deep Space Nine, but I'm just going to try to keep it simple. We can go all the way back to Enterprise, and there have been fans that have been having issues with some of the continuity problems and things like that ever since then. Ever since we
Right.
started going backwards, and we started going backwards with Enterprise. That was the first prequel, and then we got the Kelvin movies, and then we got Discovery, and it's all going backwards. Of course, now Discovery is going way forwards, which begs the question: why didn't they just do that to begin with, so they don't have to alienate the fandom? You know,
Right. Right.
because there are people like myself that are really, I'm a big continuity guy. I am into continuity. I don't say that you have to be slavish to continuity, but I'm big into continuity. And when I see massive continuity problems, especially with Star Trek, because I'm so into Star Trek, it it, it upsets me. It upsets me.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So, my take on this is, first of all, I don't know if either project is actually going to happen. I have kind of issues with both. Like, I'm not even sure, like, what is Tarantino going to do a like original series era with a completely different cast? Is he going to just do something completely different? Because I thought the original idea was that he wanted Kirk in it. I mean, there was even a rumor a while back that said William Shatner might be in it.
Well, yeah.
So, so
And I had. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, so I don't know exactly what they're going to do here. I think that there is definitely, I think there's some thought at Paramount specifically that they kind of want to finish the Kelvin stuff and move on maybe and provide something satisfying for those fans. Like myself, I watched the first one. I refused to watch the second one or the third one because I felt they were both using the hooks from the original Star Trek 2 and Star Trek 3. Spoiler alert, Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan, Into Darkness, Khan. Spoiler alert, Star Trek 3, Search for Spock, Star Trek Beyond, Enterprise blows up. I don't appreciate that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Especially from guys who go around saying they're not big Star Trek fans. Because that's
Right.
the bad robot guys have been saying that. JJ's been saying that. Kurtzman said that. They're more Star Wars guys. They say that all the time. So that's why I've had an issue going forward with the Kelvin stuff. Like I said, I thought the first movie was good, and I thought the entire idea of an alternate timeline is fine. Mirror Mirror is one of my favorite episodes. I've always also said with like Enterprise could have gotten around a lot of stuff by being a little bit more forthright with the idea that, hey, there's this temporal time war going on, or sorry, temporal Cold War going on. This is in the wake of the Borg having messed up the timeline from First Contact. So they could have kind of got away and said, well, Enterprise is kind of its own alternate universe. And there's actually, have you seen the three timeline theory?
No, I have not.
Okay, so this is from Anti-Trekker, I think is his site. I want to give credit where credit is due. What he's tried to do is reconcile all the problems in Enterprise and Discovery with these alternate timeline theories. The official alternate timeline thing is just Kelvin and Prime, right? We've got the Prime timeline and we've got the Kelvin timeline. There was a
Right.
graphic that CBS or Paramount came out with a long time ago to show, hey, this is where it diverges. So everything before then would be the same, but after this, it's all different. We're not wiping out the Prime universe; it's still there because there were concerns that the Prime universe was wiped out because that's actually the way Star Trek always said time travel worked. They didn't say it was the Marvel way; they said it was they actually are time traveling, actually affecting the timeline. But
Right.
Kelvin changed that. Kelvin said, no, we're going more with sort of the Marvel Endgame philosophy, where it's like, no, we're creating another universe by doing this alternate timeline. So a lot of people have kind of gone back on this, and they've kind of looked at this idea in terms of Enterprise. And there's an argument to be made that, again, because of the events of First Contact, the intervention of the Borg, that what happened was after First Contact, another universe was created. So therefore, Enterprise is based on that universe, and Discovery is based on that universe. You see what I'm saying? So that's actually another timeline. It's different than what was in the quote unquote prime timeline that's based on what we see in the original series and going forward from there. That's the 3 timeline theory, which I kind of like. As a fan, I like it. I don't think CBS subscribes to it, but as a fan, I like it.
No, I like it too because it sets Discovery in its own, you know what I mean, kind of pocket universe idea. You know what I mean, just like with the Kelvin. So
and then you can explain the different looking Klingons. You can do whatever you want. You know what I mean? So
yeah, it explains all of it. It explains why everything is, slightly divergent. So yeah, interesting. Huh. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's not my idea. Anti-Trekker does if you want to look that up sometime, it's Anti-Trekker. He does a pretty good video about it. I like it. As a fan, I really like it. If I was running things at CBS Paramount, at Viacom, I should say, I guess, that's what I would say. I would say like that's what we're going with, and we're going to put that out there as canon.
Cool. So, do you have another news item you want to get into, or do you want me to do one?
Let's do yours.
Okay. All right. If you'll share what's on my screen.
Let me get that up real quick.
So I guess a lot of people have already heard, but if you have not, comic book artist Tom Lyle passed away. It's rather sad. He was not. I mean, to me, which there's an article here on DC Universe that I pulled up. For me, he will be probably my favorite Robin artist. I loved his work on Robin, particularly the Tim Drake version. Of course, I grew up with the Dick Grayson version of Robin, which is the one who eventually became Nightwing. This is the Robin that followed in the wake of Jason Todd's death. Of course, Jason Todd went on to become the Red Hood. But he was just a tremendous artist. He didn't just work on Robin, though, or a lot of people have been talking about his work on Spider-Man. He did a lot of the Scarlet Spider stuff back during the Clone Wars or a Clone Saga era of Spider-Man. But a lot of people are not talking about the fact that he worked with Chuck Dixon on the revival of Airboy. That's actually what led to them working together on Robin over at DC. He also did a stint on The Punisher. A very, very accomplished artist. He was also an instructor at SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design. Of course, a lot of people remember that he helped co-create the character of the Spoiler, who eventually went on to become a very popular version of Batgirl. And then, of course, he also worked on Starman, which is a very fondly remembered series. And another series that I quite liked back in the day that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about or highlighting is actually his work on the Impact Comics line, the revival of Comet, which is part of the Archie Comics line from back in the day. So very distinguished artist with an amazing career and a legacy. Someone who was very active in the industry is I was like in high school and stuff, and I read a lot of the work that he did, and just a tremendous comic book artist. And we got to slow down here going on.
Yeah, we lost you for a second, Dave. We did lose you for a second.
Okay, sorry.
It's like we popped out for a little bit.
All right. So all I want to say is Tom Lyle was a tremendous artist, and according to all accounts from everyone I've heard posting and stuff, I never had the chance to meet him. He was also a great teacher as well, and everyone has nothing but really great, wonderful, glowing things to say about him. So tremendous loss to the industry, in my mind anyway, when you look at him working as an educator and a teacher, helping to train the next generation. And then when you look at the legacy of his work, whether you're talking about Starman, whether you're talking about Robin, whether you're talking about any of these characters he worked on, I think his legacy will definitely live on. So we just want to take a moment and remember comic book artist Tom Lyle. There is a GoFundMe to help his wife with some of the medical bills. from what happened, and because he did have a medical condition that basically put him in the hospital, and he passed away as they were basically trying to save his life. I'm going to share that on my Twitter. So if people are interested in going and donating and helping out in that way, there's a way in which we can actually, as fans, show our appreciation for Tom's work and also help out his wife and her basically hour of need right now. So anyhow,
do you have that up on your Twitter?
I'm going to put it on there. I did post it a while back, but I think I got buried in the feed. So I'm going to put it back to the top and then pin it.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's a shame when these kinds of things happen, but it's good that you're out there remembering them and telling people a little bit about them.
And that's the big thing is, like I said, just, if you're on social media, Facebook or whatever, find your favorite Tom Lyle image, share it, whether you're on Twitter or Instagram or whatever, find your favorite Tom Lyle image, put a little message out there, and let's remember Tom Lyle. And because I bet there's some fans who still haven't heard. I was kind of shocked when I saw this. It kind of reminded me what it was like when Mike Ringo died. It was the same thing. No one knew he was having any health issues, and then all of a sudden he was gone. So,
yeah, and I'm sure there's quite a few fans out there that are familiar with his work, but weren't really familiar with him. That unfortunately happens a lot in the comic book industry.
Very true. That's very true. So yes, I'm gonna retweet this and then get this to the top of my feed, and then I'm going to try and pin it there. So, but definitely too, also, like I said, find your favorite image that Tom Lyle might have created, and let's just share it on social media and remember him. I think that's a kind of a fun thing to do.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, so that's it for my my pop culture news.
Well, I did have another big story that I wanted to talk to you about, and this is DC related as well. So there's been a lot of coverage saying that Joker 2 is a go. Have you heard this?
I've heard all kinds of random reports regarding what's going to be happening with the Joker film, the sequel. So
this is a Deadline article. It's dated November 20th. At 9 o'clock today, so it's about as current as you can get. This was promoted on IMDb, so I think this is a pretty reliable article. It says, don't dress for Joker sequel yet. Insiders say Todd Phillips never pitched origin film series and other DC characters. By the way, that's, I guess, what started the whole rumor, was that apparently there was this report that Todd Phillips had gone in to pitch all these other origin stories. Other characters, and during that sort of pitch meeting, Joker 2 came up and they were like, let's do this. So that's what it sounds like. That's how the rumor started, and what Deadline is saying is that never happened. It said the Joker sequel news that hit a trade today is great clickbait, but multiple inside sources said that while a sequel to the billion-dollar grossing film is an obvious likely eventuality that makes all the financial sense in the world, at this point, there are no deals for a sequel, nor even any negotiations with director Todd Phillips or his co-writer Scott Silver to craft one.
Wow.
So the sources add that the linchpin of today's story, that a week after Joker's openings, Phillips met with Warner Brothers film chief Toby Emmerich to pitch a portfolio of DC character origin stories, is as flat false as earlier stories that Martin Scorsese contemplated directing the first Joker. It says Scorsese was originally going to be a producer, but dropped out because of his crowded schedule. So that apparently was the source of the rumor, and they're saying that that's all it is. It's just a rumor. As of right now, Joker 2 has not been greenlit. We've kind of talked a little bit about our thoughts on a Joker 2 and some of the issues it might cause. So I guess at this point, we just don't know what they're going to do. Apparently, there hasn't even been a discussion yet about Joker 2, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, it is terribly interesting, especially when you consider it's one of the most profitable, if not maybe the most profitable, comic book based, inspired, influenced movie I think that's ever been made. Because when you look at what they spent on it versus what they made on it, I mean, it's incredible. Like, it made them a lot of money. It's weird when these really successful films, like, for example, like, to go back to Warner Brothers again, if we want to look at, Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman movie, the first Gal Gadot Wonder Woman film. That film was a huge success, and they hadn't even started negotiations or even thought about talking about doing a sequel. So while that film was doing incredibly well at the box office and having some impact, in terms of people being exposed to the character and finding something that they wanted, that they found worth admiring or whatever, and the fact that it was a female superhero was incredibly successful at the box office. Like, it was like a bit of a pop culture moment, right?
Right.
And it was
Absolutely.
the same thing. Same thing. They hadn't even had any conversations about a sequel or anything. So it always seems like that, for whatever reason, Warner Brothers is always caught with their pants down when they have a really popular film like this. They go, "Oh, you guys actually like that? Oh, maybe we should talk about doing something else whenever we get around to it." I just find that kind of weird.
Well, this does give credence to the reports, and we've talked about it, that the Joker was kind of always meant to be a standalone one shot, and so there wasn't a quote unquote sequel plan. You see what I'm saying? So
Right, yeah.
This gives a little bit more evidence that that might be the case. Now, I still think that there is, because of the way the Joker ends, that there is obviously an avenue for a sequel. We just don't know at this point if that's really anybody's intention or not. I mean, like I said, I've always heard that it was supposed to be a one shot, and so they might be scrambling a little bit to figure out how they would want to continue this. And then, of course, the big thing is, I don't think there's any way they would do it without Joaquin Phoenix, and he's not even mentioned in this article. So
Yeah.
how does he feel about it? Does he want to do it? Who knows, right? I haven't really heard anything about whether Joaquin Phoenix himself is even interested in doing another one.
Right. Well, I think that you can't, in my mind, you can't do another one without him, one. And then number two, my understanding, everything I've always heard, is that this was intended to be a standalone film. It was never intended to be more than that. It was just supposed to be a one-off Joker, kind of Elseworlds kind of story. And then if it was successful, there were some negotiations about doing something along the same line. So we might get like a Superman Red Sun, for example, or possibly a Gotham by Gaslight, another, one off in a different time period. You know what I mean? Just reinterpretation of a character, like a deep dive character study in a setting and in a way in which you would not have expected. That's what I thought they were going to do. Anyway.
Well, that's what this story, that was the underlying idea of this story, was that Todd Phillips had pitched a bunch of origin, like a whole film series of one shots, essentially, of redoing origins or doing kind of all these Elseworld kind of things. That's kind of the origination of this whole Joker 2 thing too. And apparently neither rumor is true. So,
well,
at least not at this point. I could see it happening. And this might even be somebody out there at Warner Brothers kind of saying this needs to happen. They do float information out there to see how the public reacts to it, right? So they do put false stories out there. There's no doubt that they don't do that. So it could be something where they just want to kind of gauge what people think of that. Which that entire concept is an interesting idea of just having a complete like origin film series, where you're just going through different characters and kind of retelling their origins with these interesting character studies and stuff like that. Who knows? It could happen. So, but at this point, it's all rumor.
Interesting.